Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Typically, I would wait for a conference room to join, but right now I am hoping dearly that I don't see any conference rooms joining.
Morning, everybody.
Hello.
Now, given situations, I am not sure how long to wait for the folks who will definitely be attending, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a good 4 more minutes. So we start at 5 after. And Stephen, you mentioned that you had already showed off, but if you would like to show that you've published the mutation queue link as a separate
Yeah.
open source package, then that's probably worth a couple of minutes of time. I think that is right in line with what we want to be doing, so worth talking about.
Sure. Yeah, I can just start the screen share. Let me see how that works. Hello?
It's okay. You don't need to start yet. I think we still want to wait another couple of
Oh,
minutes.
well then you can't see my screen anymore.
Well, you're prepped. You're prepped. That's good. It's good to be prepped and ready. Uh,
now I'm embarrassed. Everyone knows that I prepped.
you're a prepper.
I feel like, yeah.
Yeah, you do want it to be easy. I think there was an Italian Renaissance concept, which I've always loved, called sprezzatura, where you have to do really cool, difficult things, but you have to make it look easy. Just be very fashionable, but look like you kind of don't care. Like I'm wearing a $1 million suit, but I put a Rolex like on the outside of the suit sleeve. That would be my aesthetic if I had a $1 million suit, which I don't.
If I had $1 million.
I'd be rich. Okay. We're starting to get to quorum status here. Again, I'm going to give it until 5 after. Meanwhile, hope everybody's well. This is going to be a fantastic test of whether Blue Jeans holds up to this many folks, not just in our meeting, which this is a normal number, but just however many people are using the Blue Jeans network right now. I figure it's a fair number. Okay.
Ow.
Uh-oh.
Wanted to show off my art.
Yeah, it's nice to see that some people have art. I'm still redoing this office. That's good. A French press, a labeled mug, so you know that that's not the one
You
with
know, it's really
pencils in it.
dangerous. It's really dangerous for me to be doing, pouring any sort of liquids around my laptop, as you guys know. My
You have a loaner
experience.
laptop currently, right?
Excuse me?
You have a loaner laptop, right?
I do. Yep. That's why my name is
Yeah.
Steven in here, because the default name on these things is Loner on Blue Jeans. I
Yeah,
should
for
be
those
getting
of
my
you
replacement
who
soon.
don't get to come to these a lot, Stephen Rook has this cool habit of just kind of genetically drifting human languages. We now call things that are blocked blarked,
Hmm.
and his name is Stephen, and I don't remember what else.
No, that's it.
Those are the
Those are my only
things. There's got to
contributions.
be more. It is
Those are
5
my only
after.
contributions.
I'm gonna say yeah. Well, you've got a couple more contributions. I'm gonna say that we have enough attendees to begin. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Like I said, everybody. Welcome to PWA Studio Community Sync. We don't have a lot to show off today, but we want to do as few cancellations as possible. A lot of things get to be canceled right now, and we'd like to just remind everyone we are a distributed team. We have already gotten used to working from home and working remotely. Our employers, Adobe, have a good policy surrounding it. So if you want to, if you're around, be in touch with us. We're going to be as available as possible during this time. So let's just proceed. We're doing great. Right now, the first thing is a little bit of a callback to last week's demo where Stephen showed off that he has solved a bug with the way that we interact with the GraphQL API when doing mutations, which are unsafe in an HTTP definition, and they therefore kind of need to be properly queued. The right place to put that is the Apollo link. Stephen put it there, and that means that that piece of code is reusable, and not just within the PWA Studio context, but outside. So, Stephen, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be a quick demo. Everyone saw last week, or if people who were on the call, they saw this last week. I demoed this PR where it looks like a lot of changes, but it was actually mostly just for the UI effect of sort of clearing out the prices when you do this. But basically, what we did was I wrote this link. That you can sort of compose with your other links that Zetlin said it basically just queues up your mutations. So we were noticing that on the cart, if you tried to perform two mutations at once, such as removing an item and updating an item's quantity, it would result in a bad cart state that was returned from one of those requests. So instead of putting it on the server to handle and trust, we just ended up throwing in this link for now. Maybe in the future at some point, if the server is able to sort of resiliently handle those multiple requests hitting at the same time, we wouldn't need this. But for now, it's a simple addition. It's one line added to our Apollo link that just instantiates the mutation queue. There's a package on npm published under the Adobe organization. It's pretty much just the README you saw. And hopefully they'll publish it to their Apollo community links. That would be kind of cool. But the effect is pretty straightforward, and I'll try to do it, but it'll be pretty quick. I'm gonna hit both of these update button or the increase quantity buttons. And normally before this PR, you would have seen when you click the update button, the whole cart would sort of blank out, and you wouldn't be able to do anything else until that mutation resolved. And we did that because of this problem with the server state. So now we don't have to block the user. The user can do whatever they want on the front end, but we'll block a very minimal amount of things. So Dev has a good point, and he opened a ticket for this. But you'll see that the after the mutations are called, the totals blank out while they're in flight now. And we'll eventually have the proceed to checkout button also blank out, just to make sure that you don't go to the next page before the cart's actually ready. But we allow people to do all sorts of mutations at the same time if they're just a really fast user. So I'll just show it real quick. See, and you can see here on the waterfall that I did this. I did 4 requests, and there was no blocking that occurred on the UI. Oh my UI, okay. There's no blocking that occurred on the UI. And the requests were all handled successfully, queued one after another, and that's the gist of it. It just enforces that each of these mutations occur after the previous one has completed, and this results in the correct price total because the last thing that you get is the total from the last mutation, and the last mutation waited until the one before it was done. So it's correct. Simple as that. Demo over.
Hey, Steven. So
Stephen,
I had
please.
the pleasure of reviewing this, and you kind of mentioned there that the PR was kind of large because there was some refactors there, and it introduced like a new pattern to talons. Do you maybe want to talk about that as well, since we did add that to the wiki?
Uh, yeah, let
Definitely worth talking
me,
about. Yeah.
sure, let me pull up the community, not the community, the wiki. And where is this? Code standards. So, is this what you're talking about, Tommy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I kind of liked that if you were following our talons, the kind of the properties for those talons were getting a little unwieldy, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a nice way to clean it up. And kind of just going forward, we're going to continue like expanding on this and like defining just patterns that we're going to use and be consistent about.
Yeah, and this is a good time to also call out this code standards wiki that we probably haven't been doing a great job of keeping up to date as we've been developing a lot of this new stuff. Just sort of because of the nature, we're doing a lot of exploratory development, so we're kind of trying things out and then working out the kinks. Um, we were passing queries just wholesale as the first level props to the talons. Um, but I think at some point somebody had suggested that we instead sort of encapsulate the operations um, inside a property that you can list them all out in, and it sort of namespaces things nicely when you're trying to reference them within the Talon. So I did that in a lot of places inside this PR, and I also was spending a lot of time passing down. We're doing this so that the cart state was updating correctly. We were spending a lot of time drilling down this prop or set is card updating, and then there's some loading state checks and stuff, just to make sure that that the overall card state is correct, but without having to like put a mask over the whole UI. But as you can see, here's those mutations and queries. And there's a whole other argument about whether we should be destructuring an object within an object, but we'll do that. We'll handle that another time. Any
Hey,
questions?
Steven, do
Yeah,
you want to, the last thing I was going to say, do you want to go over the skip queue just in the case where you don't actually
yeah.
want to
Oh,
queue up all
yeah.
these mutations?
Sure, yeah. So Andy brings up a good point, and I added this thing you can do. So if right now, if in Venia, all mutations are now queued. The code basically just checks the key, the operation key, which is just a stringified version of your operation, and it looks for operation is mutation or something like that, and then it just adds it to a queue. If it's not a mutation, it just lets it through. So if you have to write a mutation that you want to be able to skip, just to happen immediately, you can just pass a context value when you call your mutate function. So as you see here, it's really straightforward. You just create your mutate function with the use mutation hook, and then inside your effect, whenever you're calling the mutation, you would just pass context, skip hue true. And if you want to see logs, I also added a debug flag for you when you're initializing the queue.
Very cool, thanks.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna stop
Excuse me.
sharing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. That is fantastic, man. Excuse me. So, next up, we're sort of tentatively going to talk a little bit about additional features of the budding extension framework. And this stuff hasn't been opened as a pull request because right now it's sort of very researchy. But I think it's still kind of worth showing off some cool stuff. Now, if you give me just a second, I will share my screen, provided that my computer isn't consuming a bunch of network, which often is the case. Okay. Oh, come on. All right. Okay. All right. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit on the fly, which is always dangerous, but who doesn't love danger, especially right now? I'm going to demonstrate on the fly some of the additional stuff that we are adding to our extension framework. And you may have seen in previous demos that we are building our extensions based on a concept of targets and build bus, which allows us to add such separate packages as Page Builder. So Page Builder, for instance, integrates with Venia concept using this intercept file, which it declares in its package JSON as participating in the PWA Studio intercept process. And in its intercept file here, what it wants to do is it exposes a function which is going to receive from the build process this targets object. And this targets object gives it access to a bunch of specific targets which operate almost exactly the same as Webpack hooks. And so for different features that we have exposed, including the Webpack features themselves, a package such as Page Builder can tap into those things and make modifications or just monitor them and log or make changes to its own logic based on what it sees. So what we have right now for Page Builder, as I may have shown before, is that a couple of our built-in targets, which are part of our build pack, are available now for Page Builder to do two things. It's identifying that it, as a package, has ES modules and CSS modules, which affects how it's built, and it adds some configuration values, which are relevant only to it, in this case, the Google Maps API, to the environment variable definitions, which makes those environment variables required and be validated and be in the user interface and be available in the .env file along with all of the built-ins. And lastly, it targets the Venia UI package instead of the build pack package because Venia UI, which it depends on, or has it lists as a peer dependency, it expects Venia UI to exist, and Venia UI exposes this one extension point called Rich Content Renderers. And Rich Content Renderers presents a simple API wherein it can add Page Builder. So in this file, we have special features, NVAR definitions, and Rich Content Renderers. That's not quite enough for a full extensibility framework, but we're going to be adding features to that extensibility framework over time based on the needs of the latest story and the latest piece of functionality. And one piece of functionality that we're working on now is a product recommendations monitoring service and analytics, and in general, the population of a tag manager or custom content. All of these things have something in common, which is that they want to sort of spread across your application some monitoring events in the manner that an old school DOM-based analytics tracker would just put a little code snippet at the bottom of your page and watch for clicks. Now in our application, we're not looking for DOM events and watching for clicks because that's not how we as developers design the application. Instead, we use higher level, more convenient concepts. Let's take here in the product full detail. This is the part of the product page that renders the core central UI. And specifically, it has a button, excuse me, for adding to the cart. And in the case of this button, it pulls in its handler, which initiates an add to cart action from where? From here, which are Talon props, which are emitted by the use product full detail Talon. So this would be a great place for us to insert extension functionality without having to copy the product full detail component, without having to take it over. And what we've done in Peregrine, which is where we consume these talons from, is we have started in Peregrine to expose our own extensibility interface. And like everywhere, that's always exposed first via the Peregrine package, declaring in its package JSON that it has extension points. It wishes to declare some and it wishes to intercept others. And so those files which actually do that are sitting here in the library folder. And in the case of declare, Peregrine says, I have a target called talons. In the declare file, you're not actually implementing what the talons target can do. You're just saying that it exists, which allows other packages to intercept it, and then later it will be implemented. So you can intercept this talent in the way of subscribing to an event before anything happens, and that's where you guarantee that here. And here in the intercept file, we have started to implement talons for intercepting, right now in a pretty manual way, but it's starting to use some common concepts which you can use. And the first one here is use product full detail. In this case, this is just a class for creating a configuration object, which you can then use to pass to your subscribers. We have now got a new build pack target, which is built-in target, available for consumption by other packages. This is called WrapES modules, a general purpose, low-level target that allows you to declare that specific files which expose specific exports can have those exports wrapped in functionality. You might recognize this as the interceptor pattern, which you use in Magento today. The interceptor pattern can be slow, but in our case, we are implementing those interceptors by generating code at build time, which solves a lot of the performance problems. And in this case, WrapES modules is passing in a wrap config. We're making our own cute wrapper config around it called Talon wrapper config, which presents a really simple API. This just says there's a use product full detail property and a use app property, and those are simple sets, and you can just add file names to them. So here's where things get interesting. Over here in a separate, whoops, not there. Over here in a separate package that I apparently closed the editor for. I am working on the snowplow tracker, which is a general purpose tracker system that right now we're using for collecting data regarding product recommendations events. This tracker is a completely separate module. And right now it contains a lot of code that is for the Magento existing storefront for Luma. But we have a PWA folder that we've added to this tracker. And indeed, it does have an intercept file, which again is mentioned here in the base package JSON. PWA Studio targets intercept. And here in this intercept file, what are we doing? We're adding this code to the special features. We're adding some environment variable definitions for configuration on a project level. And we are targeting this new talons feature of Paragon. We receive talons, and sure enough, we can use the properties hanging right off this talons config to say, I want to add this interceptor to use app, and I want to add this interceptor to product full detail. So here in Venia, I have added this local developed extension to the list of dev dependencies. And since it is declared as a dev dependency, it gets detected by the build bus on the way up. Let's watch it happen. Actually, maybe I'll do, yeah, we'll just do the plain old watch. Let's see, we got a question in chat. How does the author of Snowplow know the names? Oh, hello, Stephen. This is going to be public API, just like all of the base built-in targets such as envar definitions and special features. Any given package that exposes or declares these targets needs to document them as part of its public API. Additionally, it needs to have testing for it. So long story short, they know because it says so. And because their peer dependency that they've declared on Peregrine will fix them to the version range that they know is going to have these. So all right. Here we are in product full detail. Let's try adding something to the cart. Well, it doesn't look like anything changed, but that's not the purpose of this extension. The purpose of this extension is to add monitoring functionality that sends out to the Snowplow beacon. And look here. It may be a little hard to see there are calls to this thing called TP2. That's the collector URL for, for the beacon. What are we sending to it? A bunch of data, name of the home page, and then down here, the last thing that we did, name of the product page, and then down here, the shopping cart one. Can't find it. There is one that's actually posting shopping cart data, but because I'm doing this on the fly, can't find it. There we go. Posting shopping cart data because we clicked handle add to cart. We got the cart ID. We got other data. How is this working? Well, in our sources tab where we can see the source mapped generated code, let's look at what use product full detail is now.
I'm scared.
Wrap ESM loader added an import. It was what Magento 2 Snowplow.js requested to be added. What did that do? Down here, where the actual to be exported talent is declared, it's done a small change to the name of the talent and it stopped exporting it. And then at the end, it exports the named talent again. It runs that wrapper on it. You can stack these wrappers and they'll just be composed function calls right here. But this is editing the code in real time during the build process. And if you just want to check here to make sure that I'm not cheating, a little bit of look behind the curtain. The source code still makes no mention of that. There's no additional export. There's no additional import. So because we've done that, wrap use product full detail is now a function that has executed on the talent function itself before the talent function is exported. So let's see what it does. Wrap use product full detail receives the talent, the original implementation, and returns a new function, which runs the original implementation because you're going to want to do that. And then with that API, it wraps its handle add to cart event and runs its own tracker. The
And
full impact
in
of this, sorry?
I was just wondering, so the code here has this wrapper has access to things like the cart context.
Yep.
Okay.
It functions like anything else in the actual Vinia codebase or in the Vinia UI codebase. It's going to execute in the same context. What we're going to learn is that for a lot of things like this, analytics and well, basically, I think anything that gathers data, the system will expose something called data layers, and that exists in Magento, and that's a concept in most tag managers, where the current models and entities that are displayed on the page are available as simple JSON objects somewhere in a global context. And right now, because Magento does that, the data layers are available to analytics in one easy object, just window.datalayers. We're going to end up growing those data layers over time. So we'll find that as third-party extensions want to consume and intercept these talons, that the implementation of the talons is going to grow to accommodate the kind of data that those things need. In this case, you can just use the cart context and we'll find out, if that has any serious side effects. It shouldn't, because that's how our hooks work. But as you develop extensions that work with and intercept these talons, which will have a great deal of functionality all over the code base, it would be great if not only internally as we develop extensions as functionality, but externally, you can open pull requests and follow the pattern like we've shown here in the interceptor for Peregrine and expose additional talons. It's obviously a really common, simple pattern, but per our general practice, we're going to try not to expose a whole bunch of functionality at once, but rather individual functionality that can achieve a particular business case, in this case, monitoring, adding to cart. So if you want to wrap a new talon, you can open a pull request to add it to this list or to this class, and then ultimately it'll make it in because that's in everyone's interest. And then because they've made it in and because you have specific needs, you may end up changing the way that the props or the API that use product full detail returns works. And you'll probably just be able to make additive changes. But you can see here that this is a way that you could go throughout the entire code base, right, in your interceptor, a whole lot of other taps into these talons, and instrument your entire code base with analytics code without having to go through all of your actual React components and paste little tracking code snippets all over the place. We're really excited about that as a concept and all the other things that you can do with extending talons. And that's my demo.
That's
Boom.
really cool. That is really cool. I'm excited
Thank you.
to work with this.
Cool. Any other questions from community, etc.?
No, exactly.
Thank you.
I had a quick question, and this may be not super pertinent, but I noticed that this kind of comes down to that naming again that I had a question about. So we know that the Snowplow author knows because we have a public API. Is it possible that we could just instead of maintaining a list of functions, we just have a single getter function for those, and then that can return? Like it feels like you're accessing a prop that may or may not. It makes it harder to deprecate, etc.
I considered that, and actually accessing props that don't exist to me is a feature. Rather than having to write custom error checking code and documentation code for the string named talon you requested doesn't exist, we can leave it to plain old JavaScript just to throw an exception. The other thing is that one of the ways that this code base should be discoverable is that when you are debugging, and or when you are expecting IntelliSense to come out of your code editor, you should get autocomplete. So you should be able to press talon wrapper config dot and then see what's available to tap as a list of sets. So both of those things, I think, affected my decision to do it this way, but my decision isn't necessarily final. We can discuss it more. That's my reasoning.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Thank you. Anything else?
When do we get to look at this?
I will be opening a pull request sometime in the middle of next week. I needed to get the code coverage finished for this, and in doing so, I think I may also soon have some testing utilities for your own code, like if you're developing an extension so that you can quickly test one of these targets and your interceptor for it. So once I've got proper coverage and the ability to do that, then I'll be able to open the pull request. Stephen, your shirt has a, oh. Cat.
Don't do it. Don't let
Cat.
my dog see your cat. Don't do it.
Yeah. Dogs respond a lot to an image of a cat. Their eyes are the way that they tell that cats are there.
She's really crazy.
Okay. Oh, we have one more chat. Thank you, Michael. More cats is what comes in. I can go get my cat. He's a dog, but I'll just move him so he's blurry. All right, so that's my demo. The last thing that we have on the actual agenda is demonstration of a little story that we went through about personal identifying information and how we can make sure that we store it responsibly in our live PWA. And that is Andy's job to talk about. Andy Terranova, are you ready to do so?
Oh, yeah. Let's do this. Hello. Can you see my screen?
Hello, Andy.
Hello. I don't have a cat either, but I think my dog's a little bit too big to make it blurry.
Just make some meowing sounds.
Okay, so this PR was merged yesterday, so the title is Remove Mutation PII while still updating the cache correctly. So a couple weeks ago, I think probably, we identified this issue over here in our Apollo cache when we're issuing mutations. PII, or personally identifying information, was showing up here as keys in the cache, which because we use Apollo cache persist, gets persisted out to local storage, which introduces some attack vectors. Anyway, I won't go into too much detail on that. There's a blog post here that's linked from this PR, so if you're interested, you can definitely dive deeper into that. But that's basically the problem. PII was showing up as keys in the cache. And so I think a couple of weeks ago we said, hey, all you have to do, and we modified our code base to do this, was just set no cache on these as a fetch policy on these mutations. And that solved the problem of the keys, but we have some mutations, and you can see one here who are, they, call the GraphQL endpoint that mutation, but then they're also, getting a response back. And so when the problem was when you set no cache as a fetch policy on those mutations, our cache, our customer item in our Apollo cache was not getting updated. That's kind of the definition of no cache. It won't cache the response. So we kind of went overboard a little bit as a short way of saying all that. So this PR kind of comes back and says, hey, let's not just blanket no cache these things. Is there any other way that we can hide the PII on the way out so we don't have, this create customer call has email, first name, last name, even a password here. So we don't want all that stuff in there, but we do want, when this operation comes back, to update, any cache entries we have. This one is a customer type. Most often it's the cart type that we want to be updating. So anyway, long story short, there is a way to do that. It is this connection directive. And again, for more details, you can go check out this blog post. But the idea, the guts of it, I'll say, are right here. So just in the definition of your mutation in your GraphQL, this is an Apollo specific directive. And so like the Magento GraphQL backend doesn't actually do anything with this. You can tell it, hey, this is the key that I want you to use in the cache. And so when I do that and I issue this mutation, you can see instead of all the PII showing up, it just uses this my custom key, which is just a simple string that I put in there. But you can put whatever string you want in there. We ended up going with, in the PWA Studio code base, the same, the string name of the operation that you were performing, just to kind of keep it simple. But what came out of this whole investigation, actually probably the most useful thing, is this little cheat sheet for when to use the connection directive that I just showed you and when to use no cache. And I added this. Stephen had brought up the contribution guidelines wiki, so I added this as a separate section in that. So you don't have to go dig up this PR to find that. It should be in the guidelines. So just a simple truth table for when you should use connection and when you should use no cache. There was one other thing I wanted to show, but now I can't remember what it was. Yep. Nope, I don't remember. So that's it.
Thanks, John, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Do we have any questions?
Oh, I remember what I wanted to say. Cool. Yeah, Brain, welcome to the day. So we did this in the PWA Studio code base, right? But I wanted to show y'all because we have a ticket for it, but we don't yet have a solution to make this super easy for you, merchants or extension authors or anything like this. So our idea, our goal, our target is to kind of bake this in so you can't mess it up. But that's not there yet, so I just wanted to highlight this as these are all things that are in PWA Studio right now. We've set all our fetch policies and directives, but when you're writing your own stuff, you'll want to reference this table for when you should use these things, and we'll try to bake that into the core here coming up.
That is exactly what my question was going to be, which is for something like this, what is our plan for making it simple and making the mistakes hard to make, which is kind of the aesthetic and the moral of our project. And that is exactly the reason why, excuse me, that is exactly the reason why we go past just solving the problem like Andy did, and talk about how we would set up a best practice to prevent it in the future, even if we are still publishing open source software and we can't prevent all mistakes. So thank you very much for that. And I'm told that there aren't a lot of subjects, and there's no pressing matter for our community chat, which comes after our own demos. But I want to open the floor for a couple of minutes if anyone has stuff that you'd like to bring up, and we can talk about it at your leisure. We have a few minutes left to do that.
I think, Tommy, did you want to share a community corner update?
Yeah, I did just want to do a little blurb. I've been working on the song a little bit, so no, I'm just kidding. Just remind people that if you are interested in contributing, let me actually just, I'm going to hijack this screen share for me. Andy, good movie.
I clicked stop. I don't know.
All right, can you see PWA Studio?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so if you are a community member looking to contribute and you make your way to PWA Studio repo, go ahead and head into projects. There's a community backlog project specifically for y'all. And in here, we are going to try to start kind of grooming and have work ready for the community to pick up. So instead of you having to comb through like 170 issues or something and find one that has some specific set of labels that might be accepted when you submit it to us, we now have a very groomed, prioritized list of things that you can pick up and work on. And this almost guarantees that if you pick up one of these items, we will accept it. Like, we're going to have no reason to push back that it's something that's not a priority, it's something that's obsolete, it's something that we're working on internally. Like, this is the list to go to. We have a bunch of contributors flying through this process already. Lars, Andre is doing some good work as well. So we're off to a good start. We maybe have not had as much contribution as we accepted. Like, it seemed like a lot of people were interested, and then as soon as we said, here it is, everybody kind of backed off a little bit. So anybody who's interested in work, here it is. We have two things here in the prioritized column. We meet weekly to replenish this column. So if there's anything in the backlog or just a feature that you think is missing, you can go ahead and create an issue for it. Go ahead and add a help wanted label to it. That'll bring it to our attention. We'll groom it. If we agree that it is something that should be in the code base, we'll groom it, move it to the prioritized column, give you the first crack at addressing that new feature. Otherwise, we'll open it up to the community and anybody else can pick it up. So, pretty straightforward. If you need work, want to contribute, come to this project. And I think if you have any questions for any of us, Jordan is kind of our kind of community, not liaison. I hate that word, but he's kind of like our community advocate out there. You can reach him on the community Slack channel. You can reach out to me or Andrew Wilcox. Between the three of us, one of us should respond to you and get you on track to helping contribute to PWA. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you so
comments?
much, Tommy.
Cool.
All right. Well, we are running up on time. We can talk with you in Slack. and in other socially distant forms of communication. Thank you very, very much for coming, and we will keep in touch with you and see you in Community Sync next week.
Cool. Don't touch your face.
Don't touch your face. Did I touch my face?
I think everybody's touched their face 20 times.
All right.
I've seen it.
Okay.
Documented.
Bye, folks.
See you guys.